All right, welcome back to the channel. So Terence Crawford is the top dog at 147 pounds, not Errol Spence, according to Shawn Porter's trainer and manager, Kenny Porter. And they also throw Manny Pacquiao a little bit further down than you might like. Let's talk about that because Shawn Porter should be Terence Crawford's next fight. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, watching YouTube, looking for boxing news, ran into a picture of Spencer Fearon on a channel that I had not seen before, so I dipped in to see what is this about. And on this channel, UK channel, please forgive me for not recalling the name. It really did just pop up really quickly. There was a conversation between Spencer Fearon, the co-host, and Kenny Porter, the father of Shawn Porter. And Spencer Fearon from the UK actually works for UTK Global, asked Shawn Porter who he thought the top welterweights were. And he answered the question like this. He said, number 1 is Terence Crawford. Number 2 is Errol Spence. Number 3, Shawn Porter. Number 4, Manny Pacquiao. Number 5 was Danny Garcia. I thought that was a very, very interesting list. And I agree with just about none of it. But I do understand why that list, why he would feel like that was the proper order. And for Terence Crawford, I think that is an invitation, should be considered an invitation to make this fight. Because Terence Crawford, if he beats Shawn Porter, I do believe, and I think this is fair, will really erase a lot of doubt that there is about Terence Crawford and whether or not he's serious about this Errol Spence Jr. fight and whether or not he really is the best welterweight in the world. Now, for me, I don't think that there's much of a question here about who the number 1 welterweight is. For me, it's Errol Spence Jr., and that's just it. He has 2 of the belts, and he went the absolute positive hardest route to get those belts. So I'm not sure why I would rank Terence Crawford ahead of him, nor Manny Pacquiao ahead of him. If you look at who Manny Pacquiao fought to get that championship, he fought Adrian Broner and then Keith Thurman. Adrian Broner is an excellent fighter. Keith Thurman is an excellent fighter. However, both of them have seen better days, let's put it that way. And Manny Pacquiao is a legendary fighter, extremely experienced, and he pulled that fight out against Keith Thurman. In my opinion, it was a lot closer than many, many people thought. And I do not believe Manny Pacquiao could, I do not believe he has a snowball's chance in a fire pit to beat Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. Now, will it be difficult fights? I think that they'll be difficult fights. I don't think Manny Pacquiao will necessarily get blown out. But no, man, it's just not going to happen, dude. First of all, but I'm not going to get into that. I can understand why Manny Pacquiao would be further down the list than other people than Kenny Porter put in there. But Errol Spence Jr. number 1, obviously, because he won the belt in a way that was much more difficult road against better fighters closer to their prime than Manny Pacquiao did. He's obviously the number 1 over Shawn Porter because he beat Shawn Porter. He's obviously over Danny Garcia because he beat Danny Garcia. And he's obviously over Keith Thurman because Keith Thurman lost to Manny Pacquiao. The only person that there is any question about whether or not they're the number 1 guy over Errol Spence Jr. is Terence Crawford. However, Terence Crawford has a spectacular career at 135 and 140, and at 147, he has been a multi-year reigning champion at 147. But multi-years of fighting the best competition that he's had in almost 3 years. Has it been 3 years? 2 years? It's 2 years for sure. Of 2 years, going on 3 years that he's been in the welterweight division, the best fight that he's had is his last one against a broken down Kell Brook. And that's just what it is. And I cannot vault him over Errol Spence Jr. over that. Why? Because when you look at the skill sets, well, number one, obviously because of the belts, but two, because I don't know what Terence Crawford really is. Because he's not fighting guys that Errol fought. I know Errol, if you take Terence Crawford out of the equation, Errol Spence Jr. has beaten all of the top welterweights, with the exception of Manny Pacquiao, who kind of almost doesn't count. But would love to fight him, but Manny Pacquiao doesn't want to fight him. It's just, to me, but I do understand, however, why exactly it is that Shawn Porter and Kenny Porter might want him to be the number one, because that really is the absolute best route for Shawn Porter. If Shawn Porter is able to, well, first of all, look at who Shawn Porter has to fight. Shawn Porter does have a very good opportunity in Errol Spence Jr. for a rematch, but that's not set. That is definitely not set in stone, because Errol is trying to look for the Canelo fight, or he's looking for the Terence Crawford fight, but he just doesn't have a belt. Or he's looking for the Manny Pacquiao fight. Shawn Porter doesn't have a belt. That may happen if the WBC orders it or something, but still, that's not right there for Shawn, right? And then Manny Pacquiao and Shawn, I'm quite sure Shawn Porter would love to fight Manny Pacquiao, but so does everybody else, right? And Shawn Porter is just as dangerous for Manny Pacquiao as Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. are. So I just don't see that happening. But with Terence Crawford and Keith Thurman, that's a huge chance for Shawn Porter to get his hands on the third of the 4 major championship belts in the division, and to knock out a guy that is considered to be a top pound-for-pound guy. And the other aspect of it is that Shawn didn't think he lost to Errol. So since Shawn thinks he beat Errol, even though Errol's got those 2 belts, Shawn and Kenny can I don't think that Shawn they won, but hey, man, that's okay for them to think that they did. And it's not unreasonable for them to think that they did. They gave a really terrific fight, with the exception of them being dropped. So the idea that they might discredit Errol Spence Jr. a little bit, it makes sense to me, right? Because it's like, look, man, he ain't that good. We fought him very, very, very well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in 2021 with Shawn Porter. I'm really, really hoping that Shawn Porter can get the fight with Terence Crawford. And because for Terence Crawford, I think it answers a lot of questions. And for Shawn Porter, who's just been such a warrior in the sport, man, I think that would be a great way, for him to continue the later portions of his career. He has been such a spectacular fighter in his career. I was not a big fan of like the mauling and the grabbing and the holding and all that. Not, kind of the rough, make it ugly type of Shawn Porter, man. But you can say what you want about Shawn Porter. Anybody and everybody that ever got in the ring with that dude felt him. Anybody and everybody getting in the ring with him is knowing that they got a real high quality fighter in front of them. So I don't mind him ranking himself ahead of Manny Pacquiao, because I think he beats Manny Pacquiao. I don't mind him saying and I would rank him ahead of Keith Thurman, and I do rank him ahead of Danny Garcia, right? I think legitimately, I don't agree with the 1 and the 2 ranking, but as far as what they can actually do in the ring, and you put belts to the side, I would have him number 3 over Manny Pacquiao. And again, I don't think Manny Pacquiao beats him. Thank goodness for the PBC for Shawn Porter, because if it wasn't for them and if it wasn't for that environment they have over there, man, he might have been thrown under the bus a long time ago. But here we are sitting talking about him years after he won his first belt, years after he lost it for the first time against Kell Brook, years after he fought Keith Thurman and lost, and he's still relevant because he grinds so hard and he's such an excellent fighter. Really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do this year, and I certainly hope Terence Crawford gives him this fight. But I don't think that Terence is number 1 pound for pound. That's my take. Oh, no, excuse me. Number 1 in the welterweight division. In number 1 pound for pound, I don't have him there either. I got Errol Spence Jr. number 1 in both. But that's just what I think. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.